As we continue our travel in the Eastern Cape, where hunger is increasingly forcing young and old to scavenge in the dump sites for food and dig sand out of the river.
Ndifuna uba ndibe noncedo ukuba mandikwazi ukuthenga impuphu ndithengele nabantwana bam i-uniform.
We witness even more suffering in a province dubbed the home of legends.
Makunile imvula kwenzakalani? Niyakwazi ukuhamba niye esikoleni?
Asiye esikolweni.
Nenza njani?
Siyahlala emakhaya ngoba mesile esikoleni ngefe siyabuya kugcwele ebridgini.
Ndalimala kweli bhilinji ndiphuma kokhokha esitolo ngaphetsheya.
What is the response of the provincial government to some of its people increasingly being forced to rummage through dumps and struggle daily for their survival? This is Ehlolweni in Bizana. The area is known as Kwapelepele. It is part of the small, still developing Winnie-Madikizela Mandela municipality in the Alfred Nzo region. The district is the poorest in the country and has a population of about 800,000 people. According to the 2018 Stats SA General Household Survey, 33% of the Eastern Cape's children don't live with either parent. Most residents depend on social grants to survive. Multiple reports have pointed to corruption and poor governance as some of the reasons behind the continued lack of development in the province. In search of a better life, parents migrate from rural areas to urban areas. Some do not find work, and their children end up foraging from dams and rivers and begging on the streets to survive. Last week, we brought you the story of 20-year-old Luthando Mia, who is housed by Good Samaritans and was left by his mother with relatives when he was 7. He says she lives in Gauteng and he last saw her in 2019. Luthando stayed at a children's center, but now that he's over the age of 18, he must fend for himself. Luthando requested us to conceal his identity.
So wafika kanjani la? Bekazosebenza noma kubo la?
Bengazosebenza but wayenzisa kufamily yakhe. Uhlala notata eCarltonville.
Like many young people who left home because of poverty, he must fend for himself on the streets of Umtata, surviving by pushing trolleys in town.
Ndiyakwazi ukuthenga ukutya nempahla xa ngaba ndithe ndaseyiva. Kuyaseyiveka ngeentsuku zepeyi.
We also spoke to young women working at this landfill site in Umtata. Instead of attending school, they come here every day to forage for food and items of value with their mothers.
Ndina 16, hlala apha ePongweni. Andinabhethe, andifundi, asinakhaya, siyagcina. Siyagcina. Sithi kuze sitya sizapha etipini siqoqe iplastiki. Sitye. Ewe asinakutya.
Her 18-year-old friend also has no birth certificate and ID and says life at home is unstable, hence a decision to assist her mother at the dump site.
Umama yathi uma nixabana nomakhulu mina ndandinayo ibhethe ekuqaleni. Waxabana nomakhulu wam so yatshiswa. So ke ngoku xa bemane bexabana ngomakhulu angafuni uyenza yabo umama then ke nguyena asokoliseke. Sibafuneka aqalame othini awucenga umakhulu uba thini xa ndenzele ile ibhethe yam.
Reverend Tsepo Machaya runs an organization that fights poverty in Umtata, which sometimes prepares food for the needy.
I will start with the young ones. Most of them if you listen to their stories, they are quite touching. There are those that have left homes due to not having parents, let me put it that way. Some of them, their parents are still living, but they are not prepared to leave their children because they are married to other people who are not the paternal or the maternal parents.
He says most of these young people don't have identification documents. While they manage to assist some of them with the help of Home Affairs officials, it is a continuous battle.
I'm not sure how many cases we have had that are being referred to us by the very officials that were supposed to be doing the job. And you find that they say, well, we've got so many challenges, constraints and whatever. Then we are offering to assist those people. So there's not much that we are getting from government to assist these people. And that on its own, it tells you that we still have so many children that are having, that are on the streets that do not have IDs.
In 2019, there were almost 1 million children enrolled in South African public schools that had no identity documents. All of them came from poor and vulnerable backgrounds. Some of them end up on the streets and work in the dumps of the Eastern Cape.
If we can be in a position to have people that are going around checking all these conditions and then come up with a strategic plan how these children can be skilled. Some of them are over the schooling age. Now, all what you can do is to give them skills so that they can survive, either it's carpentry or mechanic, whatever. All of them, some of them you'll see here, they are good singers, they are artists, But unfortunately, who can develop them? It's nowhere to be found because people that can develop them are not around here. They are somewhere in bigger cities.
From Umtata, we drove for almost 5 hours to Ehlolweni village in Bizana to investigate reports of extreme poverty. We met Afikanduli, who was orphaned at 18. He started mining river sand following the death of his mother. For years, this river has been the only source of income for the community. On the other side of this expansive river, more community members are also mining sand for survival. Getting to the other side proved to be a challenge due to the bad state of the roads. The community says municipal and scholar transport bus drivers refuse to drive on these dangerous roads. We are accompanied by community leader Mbongeni Mtsolo. He has first-hand knowledge of the impact of the roads on the community.
I remember when sisenza le preschool paisans sasicele abanye abantu mabeze bazoyibona abazange ukwazi uzobona ne because abakwazi kuhamba apha endleleni so uba ngaba khona umuntu ogulayo uend up ayisweleka esendleleni engakafiki esibhedlela okanye engakafiki naseklinikhi because zonke ezo ndawo zikude abantwana ba-end up beyeka esikolweni because izikolo zikude indlela azihambeki abanye baqendaphe bengakwazi even uyofumana imali yabo le karhulumente edolophini ngenxeni yobana indlela azihambeki.
After a half an hour drive, we arrived on the other side of the river. We met Umam Zulu, a mother of 5 with an ill husband.
Ndivuka ekseni ndimenzele iparish ekseni. Ndibese ndimshiyela neparish esale sidla ndibuye ndize apha ehlolweni ndizothengisela izigadla zokuba makakwazi ukuthi athole indengane ekhaya parish.
Ngoba lo msebenzi unzima, lo umsebenzi nemali uzogama ukuthi amadoda mhlamba ukhonayo wena ukhona kanjani uma uyifika ekhaya ukhona kodwa.
Lo msebenzi lo senade nawujwayela ngoba ndiyakusebenza ndifike ekhaya ndibeka amanzi ashushu ndizivase ndizithobe ndibuyise ipilisi ndizithobe kuzoba nakusasa ndikwazi ube ndibuyele kuwo ndizosebenza ngoba nguwona ondincedidayo empilweni yam.
Our visit to Kwapelepele was soon after the devastating rains which wreaked havoc in parts of the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal provinces. The miners say the rain slowed down their business as the trucks couldn't access the area to collect sand. Mam Zulu and her colleagues say they need assistance as their way of life is unsustainable. They request the state to provide them with alternative means of survival, like commercial farming.
Ndifuna ukuthi njengoba sibabasebenzi balapha ehlolweni, urhulumente makasincede ngeprojekthi okwazi uba asincedise. Noba usenzela ntoni nje ezoba isincedise sihlukane nokuthwala umhlaba. Umhlaba uyasisinda. Singamakhosikazi, silala sikhathele, kodwa kunyanzelekile uba vuka uye ehlolweni.
Imali encane, laa truck kuthiwe 300 rand. Laa truck umnye uyikhelela laa santi uyibeka phaa phesheya komfula uyenqumbisa iintsuku ezi-3. Ayikho i-300. Amaklayenti ethu abuye aphinde ayebe laa santi ebusuku. Ungazazi uba uyodla ntoni, uyokwenza isikweleti esitolo. Ulambe, ndichitha impilo yami yonke apha, ndivulela iinkonyana zam ezimbini, ndizokwelusela apha. Ndilwela uba abantwana badle.
Xa ikhona indlela urhulumente asincedise nje noma kungento esingakwazi ukuthi sijonge nakuyo, singajongi apha kuphela kulena into ngoba lena ingu-on and off. Akuyonto ungathi uthembele kuyo ukuthi yona into ingaqhuba impilo yonke.
Until then, they continued digging the sand, drenched in water, with no protective gear despite health risks. We continue our journey on foot to meet more community members on the other side of the mountain. Without any means of transport, communities have to walk these distances from one point to the next. 2 hours later, we arrived. We finally meet villagers on the other side of the mountain, waiting to voice their frustrations. This bridge collapsed in 2019. It hasn't been rebuilt. Villagers struggled to access services until they made this ladder. Nosiviwe Savatu got injured while trying to use it.
Ndalimala kweli bhilenji ndiphuma kokhokha esitolo ngaphetsheya. Mangiqala ngiwela ndisemgcini ogcina. Sendibekile impahla ndave ndazibona sendiphinde phansi ezantsi. Ndiphuka isinqa. Ndabe ndiphuka ke ngoku amathambo ayi-2. Ndephuka ke ngoJuni nge-9 zakaJuni.
The residents say they have had enough of poor service delivery.
Asicela umgaqo, sicela ukwakhelwa ibridge, umgaqo asinawo kule ndawo sikuyo. Abantwana bafunda behla apha eladini. Beya esikolweni, isikolo sikude. Indawo yokuwela ayikho ibridge nesibhedlela sikude sikwela yacala ndiyawela ndibeleke umntana ndehla kabuhlungu apha eladini. Sazabona uba thina ngoba dala sicela sade sabona masakhe ezinkuni sizakhileyo ngoba ngoku indlela yebridge ayikho oko kwango-2019 ukuwa kwalo ibridge. Ama-bridge ayewe nalo. Abanye bawakhelwa thina zasakhelwe kwa-bridge kule ndawo. Abantwana bethu basokola.
This teenager describes what it's like after school.
Masibuya esikolweni sibabaninzi siyaphushana bayawa abanye basukume benyuke baye phezulu.
Makunile imvula kwenzakalani? Niyakwazi ukuhamba niye esikoleni?
Asiye esikolweni.
Nenza njani?
Siyahlala emakhaya ngoba mesile esikoleni siyabuya kugcwele ebridge.
Anikwazi ukuwela?
Asikwazi ukuwela.
Bese ngiyele esikoleni ngalesikhathi sewuyehlile umfula.
This young woman lives with her mother and siblings on top of the mountain. Their home partially collapsed during the recent rains and they have no means to repair it.
Cela basilungisele ibridge imizi ebhidlikile cela basifakele imixhaso.
Umam Sivato now struggles to do menial jobs for herself, a cause for misery as she now has re-evaluated her role, having been the pillar of her family when it comes to the household chores and making plans to put food on the table.
Akukho kwanto ndiyiyo, andilimanga, ndiwelwa nazizindlu zethu, andikwazi ndishuqe qumhlaba. Ndiyasokola, kukho lutho apha nditata khona, andinamkhwenyana. Abantu bam amatorho abawacholi, bachola amatorho aphelayo.
Thandile Manci is the councillor for this ward. He was elected about 8 months ago. Like his predecessors, he promises to intervene in the desperate situation of this community and push for change in the area.
Njengobona uba yonke into iyimess apha kule niwadi, so singajabula kakhulu xa kunokwenzeka mhlawumbi urhulumente kazwelonke naye asondele akhawuleze asilungiselele laa nto iphaa eplazini, because yeyona ndawo ibonakala into yobana apha ewadini yethu ine-potential uba ingakwazi ukuvelisa amathuba emisebenzi amaninzi. So urhulumente xa enokuzama nje urhulumente kazwelonke, because umasipala wethu uyabonakalisa into yobana i-capacity yokulungisa ingxaki ephayana akanayo. So yile nto sicela norhulumente kazwelonke ngoba kudala becela kwiprovince. So yile nto sicela kazwelonke nto makabuye azapha ebantwini azosilungisela eyani into, ngoba zikhona ii-investors ezifuna ukuza zizoinvesta imali yazo kusho kuthuthuka abantu bakuthi.
According to Stats SA, the Eastern Cape is the most underdeveloped province, with the majority living on barren, remote land with little or no employment opportunities. Dr. Peter Jacobs partly attributes the province's challenges to poor administration and corruption.
The one extreme category of it is what is referred to quite simply or historically been referred to as rent seeking. In other words, you've got certain agents in the economy who squeeze themselves into economic transactions, and all that they're doing is they're doing that in order to be coupon clippers. In other words, to extract rent from a specific transaction.
Dr. Jacobs is a researcher for the Human Science Research Council and has conducted extensive research on the Eastern Cape. He says the dynamics of the province are complicated.
Now, the Eastern Cape, as a marginalized province, has got two areas similar to other provinces, Limpopo, Northwest, and Mpumalanga, provinces that have historically kept, or hosted the homelands. They are eligible to receive an extra amount of money from the fiscus, from the national government's budget. And they do receive an extra amount of money from the national government. And the Eastern Cape has been a recipient of that through what is called government's equitable share. And if you look at the distribution of the equitable share, there are significantly more resources being allocated to provinces such as the Eastern Cape.
The equitable share is an unconditional allocation by the National Treasury to provincial and local governments. Population numbers mainly determine the budget allocations. For the 2022-2023 financial year, the Eastern Cape was allocated 86 billion rand, which excludes about 1.6 billion of the province's own revenue. The Auditor General red-flagged the province for having had their highest unauthorized spending in the country of nearly 1.6 billion rand. Despite being allocated around 80 billion rand every year in the past 5 years, the province remains on the back foot, with residents bearing the brunt.
You've got all these other factors working against it, explicit rent seeking, malfunctioning in the institutional governance regime, and then just elite accumulation that's kind of very disruptive to the local economy. And when you combine those two things, more money being transferred from the national to the province, and you've got all these other agents who are kind of looking out for themselves, then obviously you've got a situation where resources get channeled or funneled into other kind of areas. What this basically does, it destroys the ability of having a viable, efficient and well-functioning public system or public delivery service.
On the other hand, community leader Mbongeni Mtsolo says research has shown that the Winnie Madikizela Mandela municipality's inability to generate its own income is the main reason behind the lack of development in the area.
Xa sesiyilandela kakuhle siyafumanisa into yobana isabelo mali esisizwa kwabamasipala basemakhaya abangakwazi ukuzenzela eyabo imali ngokunokwabo incinane kakhulu. So siyacela kakhulu ku-National Treasury into yobana makazise imali apha emakhaya ayeke uyophuhlisa iindawo esezihlele zivele ziphuhlile.
Mtsolo also takes issue with the Treasury's financial controls system. Just recently, the province's Social Development Department lost about 67 million rand of unspent funds. He says Treasury should make it easy for provincial authorities to divert unspent money to other projects.
Siyarhalela ke into yobana mhlawumbi ngenye ixesha uNational Treasury xa esenza isabelo mali akaqale mhlawumbi enze into ekuthiwa ngu-public participation ehle eze apha azobona into yobana kwezi ndawo kuhlala kuzo abantu kwa i-population le yakhona ithini.
Given the Eastern Cape's poor governance record, experts say the province's financial systems must be strengthened to ensure adherence and appropriate spending.
You start with the systems that you have in place. Do you have the capacity to plan, monitor, and implement spending plans? Those are some of the key requirements that's coming from National Treasury. And unfortunately, if you look at the Auditor General report, you've got a lot of question marks. And those are really signals. Those are not positive signals when it comes to the Eastern Cape, government and structure.
At the Eastern Cape's ANC's provincial conference this year, while speaking as the outgoing provincial chairperson, Premier Oscar Mabuyane admitted that the major challenges facing the governing party were rampant corruption and the dwindling trust of South Africans in the government. We reached out to him to understand the details of his promises after his re-election, as the same challenges continued to linger throughout his first term. Premier Oscar Mabuyane had agreed to a virtual interview with us to discuss the problems facing the province. But minutes into the scheduled interview, his spokesperson called us to say the Premier wasn't well. She promised to come back to us with a new date for the discussion. But weeks later, we are still waiting. For its part, the Provincial Department of Social Development expressed concern over the conditions some residents are living under.
Where there's child labor, we totally against the prevention of children to enjoy their childhood. In instances where children have got to go and dig in dump sites, there is no society at all that should be allowing, not even children, that should be allowing human beings to go and feast in a dump site. That should not be allowed, not necessarily even by government, but it should not be allowed by communities. But what we've done as a department, we've got what we call community nutrition and development centers that we have placed in communities where people have got a problem of what we call immediate hunger. Immediate hunger is when you wake up each and every day, you don't know where you're going to get your first meal, like your breakfast. So those community nutrition and development centers, we are trying to spread them as far as possible. I know they are not sufficient, but we try by all means to make sure that we spread them in all the corners of this province.
While we will only know in time whether Mabuyane's administration manages to build a corrupt-free state with a thriving economy, the women and young people we spoke to continue to live lives dominated by hard labor to keep hunger at bay.